Big vibes, stay blessed to say this is your boy Black Finesse. We're here for another video here. This one's called Every NFL Era Explained in 25 Minutes. Video came out about 2 weeks ago, and this is by Football Explainer. It's time to get some history in our system. I know a lot, in my opinion, about, you know, the players, some of the era, good amount of the, you know, the legends for real, like the steel curtain I see down there. I'm not sure about the pack. I think that's the Lombardi era, but I'm not sure. But we're gonna get right into it, and we're gonna get right in.
1920s, the leather helmet era. This is where it all began. And it barely resembled football.
Damn.
In 1920, the league was called the American Professional Football Association, which sounds less like a sports league and more like an insurance firm. There were no real rules, no real structure, and definitely no forward passes. Teams came and went like pop-up shops. One team was literally named the Muncie Flyers, and they lasted exactly one game.
Damn.
The best team was the Akron Pros, who went undefeated and allowed just 7 points all season.
Sheesh.
How? Easy. Nobody could score. Players didn't wear helmets. They wore leather hats. Tackling someone was more of a mutual agreement than a technique. And if you broke your nose, tough. Rub some dirt on it and play both ways.
Yeah, they were tough back then.
The champion was decided by whoever had the best record. Yeah. And if 2 teams were tied, the league just kinda picked a winner. The crowds were small. The money was even smaller. But the 1920s gave football its bones. And they did it all with 0 face masks, 10-yard punts, and a ball that looked more like a loaf of bread than a spiral weapon.
They had to crawl so we can run.
Football gets a brain. The league was still awkward, but starting to figure itself out. They renamed it to the National Football League in 1922, which finally made it sound less like a tax group and more like something people might watch. This was the era when teams started surviving past one season. The Green Bay Packers became an early powerhouse. The Chicago Bears were the league's first real villains. And Bronco Nagurski was every 1930s football highlight because he was the highlight. Coaching started becoming a real job. Strategy entered the chat. Formations like the T formation and single wing began appearing, even if no one knew how to defend them yet. But most importantly, in 1933, the NFL finally separated itself from college football by creating its own rule book. Until then, they had just borrowed college rules like a bad roommate. Now, the league started shaping its identity. They moved the goalpost to the front of the end zone. They legalized passing from anywhere behind the line of scrimmage.
Why was it in the front of the end zone? Can someone answer that? I'm not sure if they're going to explain that, but I don't know why they had the goalpost at the front. Like, what if you threw a pass? Well, I mean, I'm not sure if there was forward passes just yet, but what if you threw a forward pass and run smack into the goalpost because the end zone's behind it? Like, I don't understand.
It was a wild concept at the time. And they finally created a championship game. The 1930s didn't make the game popular, but they made it watchable, and they started a trend that would define every decade after. By the way, I'm going to be posting a lot here, so it would mean a lot if you subscribed and dropped a like for the algorithm. 1940s, the war years, and the quarterback revolution. The 1940s were a weird time to be a football fan, because half the league got drafted, literally. World War II drained NFL rosters faster than a bad GM. Guys who were stars one year were suddenly off fighting in Europe the next. Some teams were so low on players, they just merged with each other. The Eagles and Steelers combined in 1943 to form a team called the Steagles, a name that sounds like a rejected XFL franchise. The next year, the Steelers merged again, this time with the Chicago Cardinals.
So wait. So as far as drafted, did some of the majority of the players choose to enlist themselves, or did they just get pulled out of the league? Like, or was it both? Let me know that.
A team so bad they went 0 to 10 and were nicknamed Card Pit, pronounced carpet, because everyone walked all over them. But somehow, football survived. And not only did it survive, it evolved. This is the decade where quarterbacks became quarterbacks.
That's Otto Graham? Is that Otto Graham? I think that's Otto Graham because he had number 60, right?
The Chicago Bears and head coach George Halas introduced the modernized T formation, which actually let QBs stand behind center, take the snap, and do things other than hand the ball off and pray. Sid Luckman was the prototype. He threw 28 touchdowns in 1943, which doesn't sound like much now, but it was absolutely insane for the time. Remember, most teams still thought passing was a gimmick. Luckman made it look like the future, and he wasn't alone. Other legends emerged, like Sammy Baugh, who didn't just play quarterback, he also punted and played defense.
He played a lot.
In 1943, he led the league in passing, punting, and interceptions.
He's a commander or
in the same season. Imagine Patrick Mahomes throwing for 300 yards, picking off a pass, then pinning the other team at their own 5. That was Sammy Baugh. The decade ended with one of the most iconic games in NFL history, the 1946 championship. But the real significance? In 1946, the NFL finally desegregated, reintegrating black players after a 12-year
Wait. I know who that is right here. This guy is a Browns player. What's his name? He's a Browns player. He's a fullback. Fuck, what's his name? I seen that number and I know that face. He's a Browns player. Fuck, I can't remember his name.
Guys like Kenny Washington and Woody Strode broke the barrier a full year before Jackie Robinson joined MLB. It didn't get the same headlines, but it was just as historic. The 1940s were gritty, improvised, and deeply flawed. But they made 2 things very clear. 1, football was going to keep going no matter what. 2, the quarterback wasn't just part of the offense anymore. He was the offense. 1950s, TV, tactics, and the birth of the Golden Boy QB. The NFL was done freeloading off college football. It wanted its own look, its own rules, and its own Saturday night spotlight. And it got it, thanks to the television boom. By 1950, games were being broadcast in living rooms across America. The NFL went from being a niche blood sport for steelworkers to a scheduled weekly ritual. The visuals weren't great. Grainy black and white, awful camera angles, and audio that sounded like it was recorded in a submarine. But still, it worked.
Hey,
football
that was real time to
the
them.
home, and with
That's
TV
what sounded
came
clear.
stars. Enter Johnny Unitas, the original prototype for the modern quarterback. Black high tops, crew cut, ice in his veins. He ran the 2-minute drill like a Wall Street day trader, fast and reckless. He played with toughness, brains, and a literal broken nose most Sundays.
Johnny Unitas.
He led the Baltimore Colts to greatness. And in 1958...
Hey, fun fact. The Baltimore Colts Stadium is at Stevenson University. Right? The original Ravens Stadium. Baltimore Colts. That's when they were the Baltimore Colts. Right? I could be wrong. I know I'm right. Right?
He gave the league its first classic, the 1958 NFL Championship game, Colts versus Giants, Yankee Stadium. It was the first game to go to sudden death overtime.
Damn.
It was nationally televised, and it was chaos, fumbles, field goals, and Unitas orchestrating one of the coolest game-winning drives in NFL history. They called it the greatest game ever played. Was it? Maybe. But more importantly, it made the NFL matter. Meanwhile, coaching got smarter. Paul Brown was cooking up new strategies in Cleveland.
The old Bengals.
He invented playbooks, practiced game film review, and even put radios in helmets. Decades before Belichick would try the same tricks. The game started to look familiar.
Which means it was already done. Okay? So stop blaming my coach. It was already done. He just simply followed the rules.
Audibles. Defenses adjusting to formations. Stats getting tracked weekly. And while the game still had a long way to go, players still wore suspender-style pads and smoked at halftime. The 1950s gave football a real identity. 1960s, the AFL rebellion,
Lombardi,
Joe Namath, and the birth of the Super Bowl. The decade opened with a curveball, the birth of a rival league, the American Football League, AFL. The NFL had grown comfortable, structured, traditional, a bit boring. The AFL, it was loud, it was fast, it had style. They gave birth to the Houston Oilers, San Diego Chargers, Oakland Raiders, and Kansas City Chiefs. Franchises that would later become cornerstones of the modern NFL. And it didn't stop there. They went head-to-head in the draft, in salary wars, and even stole players from the NFL.
Damn.
It was football's version of a rap beef, only with shoulder pads and significantly worse haircuts.
Yo.
At the center of it all was a guy named Joe Namath. Broadway
Jets.
Joe. Fur coats, white cleats, endless charisma. He was built for TV. He wasn't just a quarterback, he was a celebrity. And in 1969, he made a guarantee that changed everything.
Super Joe.
In Super Bowl III, his underdog Jets faced the heavily favored Baltimore Colts. Namath promised a win and delivered. It was the moment the AFL earned real respect.
I didn't even know the Jets got one.
And it proved that the leagues had to merge. In 1966, the NFL and AFL had already agreed to combine. The Super Bowl was born. At first, it was just a championship game. By the end of the decade, it was already on its way to becoming a national holiday. Meanwhile, coaching legends were taking over. Vince Lombardi turned the Packers into a dynasty and Lombardi Trophy into the league's holy grail. Tom Landry gave the Cowboys their robotic precision and suit on the sideline energy. Hank Stram brought innovation and headset energy before it was cool. And don't forget, the 1960s were when black athletes finally took center stage in pro football. Players like Jim Brown, Gale Sayers.
Jim Brown and Gale Sayers, that's right. Oh my goodness, are they bruised? Are they okay? Please tell me this is from football. Those jokers got bruises.
And Willie Davis weren't just dominating. They were reshaping the game's future. The league was still mostly white-owned, white-run, and white-led. But the talent on the field was changing
Is that Lions or is that Cowboys? That's got to be Mel Renfro? If that's the Cowboys? I don't think that's the Lions.
Everything. The sport had officially hit the big leagues. And there was no going back. 1970s. Defense, dynasties, and the Steel Curtain Age. The decade started with the NFL-AFL merger becoming official in 1970. 2 leagues, 1 name, and a new structure. The NFC and the AFC with the Super Bowl, now the ultimate proving ground. And from that merger came the birth of true parity. Every team had a shot, and the league started taking that idea very seriously. But what really defined the 70s? Defense. Scoring was low. Games were brutal. Helmet-to-helmet hits were just called tackles. There were games where teams didn't throw a pass for entire quarters. At the heart of it all, the Pittsburgh Steelers. From 1974 to 1979.
Joe Green, Jack Lambert, Jack Ham, Franco Harris.
They won 4 Super Bowls in 6 years.
I can't name all of them.
An unmatched run of dominance. They had Terry Bradshaw, who threw like he was launching a rocket with no target. They had Franco Harris, the power back, who ran like he was angry at the ground. But more than anything, they had the Steel Curtain. A defensive line so nasty, they made quarterbacks rethink their careers. Mean Joe Green, Jack Lambert, Mel Blount.
Mel passed the blunt.
Defense, they imposed it. The Cowboys were right there too. Tom Landry's Dallas Cowboys became America's team, which annoyed basically everyone who wasn't a Cowboys fan.
Right.
They had precision, polish, and Roger Staubach, the Navy veteran turned quarterback who invented the term Hail Mary in 1975. Meanwhile, the Oakland Raiders were chaos in cleats. They were rough, they were dirty, they looked like villains in a football movie, and they leaned into it. Head coach John Madden, yes, that John Madden, led them to a title in 1976, turning the Raiders into a cultural force. This was the NFL's bar fight era. No TikTok dances, no fantasy points, just cold weather, broken noses, and a nation falling in love with a sport that looked more like a war zone than a game. The league wasn't pretty, but it was real. And by the end of the decade, it was officially the most watched sport in America. 1980s,
Superstar
stars,
era.
swag, and the rise of the quarterback icon. This was the decade of quarterbacks.
Dan Marino, Steve
Not just
Young.
good ones, mythic ones. Joe Montana, the face of the NFL. Calm, cool, clutch. He didn't throw the ball. He placed it right in the hands of guys like Jerry Rice, who was just getting started. Together, they turned the San Francisco 49ers into a dynasty. 4 Super Bowl wins. Bill Walsh calling plays like he was running a Silicon Valley startup. They invented the West Coast offense, which changed everything. Short passes, timing, rhythm. It was less about brute force and more about outsmarting you.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, on the East Coast, Lawrence Taylor showed up like a football horror movie. A linebacker who broke the game. Fast enough to cover receivers. Violent enough to shatter game plans. LT didn't just sack QBs. He made them scared to snap the ball. He single-handedly changed how teams blocked, drafted, and protected the quarterback. You also had Dan Marino, who threw for 5,000 yards in an era where most teams didn't even try to throw that much.
He was great.
John Elway, launching bombs off his back foot and dragging teams to Super Bowls with no help. Jim Kelly, leading the upstart Bills to prominence. This was the first decade where Super Bowl commercials became iconic. Halftime shows became productions, and players became products. The league leaned into pop culture. You had teams doing music videos. Yes, the Super Bowl Shuffle happened in 1985, starring the Chicago Bears and a mustache-powered quarterback named Jim McMahon. That Bears team, by the way,
95, I can't remember.
One of the greatest
Mike Singletary, Walter Payton.
Mike Singletary, Richard Dent.
Richard Dent, that's his name.
They bullied their way to a championship and danced on the way out. And while the game got more polished, the hits still came hard. This was the sweet spot before player safety became a priority.
Yeah.
Where you could launch yourself across the field like a missile and just get a thumbs up from the ref. The 90s, the business boom, brand wars, and the cowboy empire. The 1990s were the NFL's corporate takeover. By this point, the league had national TV deals, international reach, and player salaries that finally started looking like lottery winnings. Fox got the rights to NFC games, brought in robots and guitar riffs, and rebranded Sunday afternoons into an action movie. Suddenly, football wasn't just something you watched. It was something you followed like a full-time job. And no team defined the decade more than the Dallas Cowboys. They weren't just good, they were everywhere. Troy Aikman, Emmitt Smith, Michael Irvin, Deion Sanders. It was like someone created an NFL super team in a lab. 3 Super Bowl wins in 4 years.
Damn.
A team built on talent, swagger, and the occasional locker room scandal.
Roy
Owner
Williams.
Jerry Jones turned the Cowboys into a brand. You didn't have to like them. In fact, most people didn't. But you knew them.
America's
and
team.
that was the point. Meanwhile, over in the AFC, pain. The Buffalo Bills went to 4 straight Super Bowls and lost every single one.
Damn.
Jim Kelly, Thurman Thomas, Bruce Smith. They were loaded, but they just couldn't get over the hump. It became both legendary and tragic.
That shit hurts.
They were so good, they ran out of excuses. To this day, Buffalo fans will tell you it wasn't failure, it was fate. And then there was Brett Favre. He became the face of the Green Bay Packers, bringing them back to relevance and giving Wisconsin a reason to scream in the snow again. In 1996, he finally delivered a Super Bowl win and got a Wrangler deal that lasted longer than most NFL careers. The Denver Broncos kept losing Super Bowls until John Elway got help and back-to-back rings in 97 and 98. And the NFL salary cap debuted in 1994, forcing teams to stop hoarding talent like Pokemon cards. The game itself, faster, smarter, sharper. Quarterbacks were now the centerpieces of the franchise, not just players, but investments. Teams built around them. Media obsessed over them. This was also the first time we really saw NFL fashion. Starter jackets, snapbacks. Kids who'd never seen a game wearing Raiders and Cowboys gear in the school hallway because it looked cool. By the end of the decade, the NFL was printing money. And one quiet 6th-round rookie was drafted in 1999. But we'll get to him soon. 2000s. The dynasty decade, defensive blueprints, and the rise of the machine.
Yes, sir.
The 2000s didn't waste time. The very first Super Bowl of the new millennium, on February 2000, was won by the greatest show on turf, the St. Louis Rams. Kurt Warner went from bagging groceries to throwing 40-yard bombs in domes. Marshall Faulk was playing a different sport, and the Rams' offense looked like it was running at 1.5x speed. It felt like a preview of the future, except it wasn't. Because just 2 years later, the New England Patriots showed up and said, "We'll take it from here." A no-name 6th rounder named Tom Brady replaced Drew Bledsoe mid-season, and with the help of Bill Belichick, a hoodie-wearing defensive sorcerer, led New England to their first title in 2001. They did it with defense, clutch kicking, and the kind of clock management that felt calculated. Then they won again in 2003. Then again in 2004. 3 Super Bowls in 4 years. Just like the Cowboys in the 90s, but colder, more efficient. Less about personality, more about precision. The Patriots were a system. You didn't have to love them, but you couldn't beat them. Elsewhere, the 2000s were full of iconic moments and chaos. The tuck rule game, Brady versus the Raiders in the snow, kicked off a new dynasty and ended a few friendships in Oakland. The Eagles under Andy Reid kept getting close, with Donovan McNabb, Brian Dawkins, and T.O. yelling on the sidelines like it was a soap opera. The Ravens built one of the nastiest defenses ever, led by Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, and a quarterback situation that nobody remembers.
Who the fuck is he?
Peyton Manning spent the entire decade being brilliant in the regular season and cursed in the playoffs until 2006 when he finally got the monkey off his back. Brett Favre left Green Bay. Mike Vick electrified Atlanta. And LaDainian Tomlinson made the Chargers must-watch for anyone who liked touchdowns and flip celebrations. The salary cap got tighter. Free agency became critical. Defensive backs couldn't touch receivers like they used to, thanks in large part to Peyton Manning lobbying the league after the 2003 AFC title game. Pass interference became a weekly debate, and replay review became a permanent fixture. This was also the decade of growing paranoia. Spygate hit in 2007, accusing the Patriots of filming opponents' signals. Teams started covering their mouths on the sideline like they were in a poker tournament. Trust no one became the unofficial slogan of every coaching staff. And right at the end of the decade, we got the 2007 Patriots, a team that went 16-0 in the regular season with Brady and Randy Moss putting up video game numbers, only to lose in the Super Bowl to a 9-7 Giants team led by Eli Manning, a helmet catch, and the most chaotic fourth-quarter drive of all time.
I know that's been cursing Rodney Harrison.
2000s. And the NFL, now the undisputed king of American sports. 2010s. The analytics era, air shows, and the second act of a dynasty. The 2010s started with a bang, literally. The Saints won their first Super Bowl in 2009.
Against the Colts.
Technically, February 2010, powered by Drew Brees, a surprise onside kick, and the city of New Orleans rallying behind one of the greatest comeback stories in sports history. It felt like a changing of the guard. The Patriots' run was over. Manning, Brees, Rodgers. This was their time.
No, it wasn't.
Except Brady wasn't done. Not even close. This decade saw football go through a data explosion. Teams started hiring math nerds with glasses and spreadsheets. Terms like win probability and expected yards per play entered mainstream broadcasts. Punts on 4th and 3 became old school. Coaches like Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan brought in play designs that looked like Madden playbooks. Motions, jet sweeps, pre-snap chaos. Defenses were guessing, and quarterbacks were feasting. Quarterbacks took over. Aaron Rodgers started the decade by winning a Super Bowl and spent the next 10 years doing things that looked fake on replay. Drew Brees racked up records like he was trying to complete a stat sheet for retirement. Andrew Luck arrived, dominated, and left before the decade ended. And then there was Patrick Mahomes, who showed up in 2018, rolled out to his right, and threw 60-yard lasers across his body like it was a normal Tuesday. By the end of the decade, Mahomes had an MVP, a Super Bowl, and a rocket arm that rewrote every rule. Don't worry. Defenses still had their moments. The Legion of Boom turned Seattle into a fortress. Richard Sherman, Cam Chancellor, Earl Thomas. They didn't just hit hard, they talked hard. In 2013, the Seahawks demolished the record-breaking Broncos in the Super Bowl. It wasn't even close. They were fast, physical, and mean. And for a while, it looked like a new dynasty was forming. But then came Super Bowl 49.
Oh yeah, that hurt them.
Seattle, New England, 1 yard to win the game. And instead of giving the ball to Marshawn Lynch, they threw it. Malcolm Butler intercepted it. And the Patriots, again, were back on top. You'd think after 3 rings in the 2000s, Brady would slow down. He didn't. From 2014 to 2018, he made 4 more Super Bowls and won 3. He came back from 28-3 against the Falcons in Super Bowl 51.
Yes, he did.
The greatest comeback in NFL history.
Yep.
He threw for 505 yards in a Super Bowl and lost. Then, in 2018, he won another by beating the Rams in a game where the final score looked like it was from the 1940s. Brady wasn't just a quarterback. He was a system-proof, time-resistant anomaly. Players embraced social media. Mic'd-up segments went viral. Odell Beckham Jr. made one catch on Sunday Night Football and turned into a global icon. Memes, fantasy football, and red zone turned casual fans into weekly addicts. The NFL was no longer just on TV. It was in your feed, in your group chats, and on your screen 7 days a week. 2020s, COVID, chaos, and the Mahomes era begins.
Garbage.
The 2020 season was like a dystopian sci-fi movie. Empty stadiums, daily COVID tests, and players being pulled off the field mid-game because their test results came in late. Entire position groups got wiped out overnight. Games were rescheduled to Wednesdays. Coaches wore masks. Refs wore face shields. And the crowd noise pumped in like laugh tracks on a sitcom. But somehow, the season finished. And in the end, Tom Brady,
still
now
got a
in
ring.
a Tampa Bay jersey, walked into Arrowhead Stadium in Super Bowl 55 and dismantled the Chiefs. At age 43, new team, new system, same ending. It was a mic drop. By the time Brady left the stage, Patrick Mahomes was already being crowned. He was already the most feared man in football. No-look passes, left-handed throws, fourth-quarter comebacks. He wasn't just playing QB, he was remixing it. But it wasn't smooth sailing. The 2021 season exposed cracks, injuries, inconsistent line play, and a shootout loss to Joe Burrow and the Bengals in the AFC Championship.
They lost to the Rams.
Suddenly, Mahomes wasn't unstoppable. He was mortal. He bounced back with another MVP and a Super Bowl win over the Eagles in Super Bowl 57. The 2020s also marked a shift in how we watch the NFL. Games aren't just on cable. They're on Amazon Prime,
they bet on them
Peacock,
now, too.
YouTube TV. Players have platforms now. They drop vlogs. They post mid-game tunnel fits. Some fans know Micah Parsons' YouTube channel better than his sack totals. And Travis Kelce went from elite tight end to Taylor Swift's boyfriend in one halftime.
That is so disrespectful, yo. They did him so wrong. So wrong.
We're watching the next wave take shape. C.J. Stroud looks like the real deal. Lamar Jackson is still redefining quarterback play. Caleb Williams is already being discussed like he's inevitable. And guys like Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, and Micah Parsons are becoming the faces of a post-Brady, post-Breeze league. If you enjoy...
we're not going to talk about how the league is, and these new rules is just messing up everything. Don't forget about that. This is also the Mahomes era. It's a bad era. We need to go back to the Brady era, the New England era. Because that was fun to watch, even though the Patriots were winning. No one wants to see the Chiefs winning off some fluke shit. You know. Make sure you comment, like, subscribe down below. It's your boy Black Finesse. We're out.